Hey guys, it's been about 2 weeks since I last did one of these. I'm going to try and keep it on a 2 week schedule every Monday afternoon, or every other Monday afternoon during the off season, unless something comes up that warrants talking about trades. Maybe during the Rule 5 deadline, kind of if things don't fall on that Monday, make an episode for that. But yeah, I think every other Monday in the afternoon is where we're going to shoot for these during the off season. Sitting here October 2nd, and the Red season came to an end yesterday with a win against the Chicago Cubs that sealed their fate for the number 5 overall draft pick in the 2018 draft, which, had they lost, they would have been at number 4, so things could have gone a little bit differently. Not that there's a huge deal there, but the difference between the 4th and 5th pick last year was about $460,000, I believe, so it's not nothing. But the difference isn't very big. Now, as far as the actual Reds season and how things winded down, I think there were some positive notes. The young pitching performed quite well down the stretch. Luis Castillo was great all season. He was shut down. Tyler Mahle was shut down after a few starts. He didn't show the best, but he got the job done in his 4 starts. The control wasn't quite what you expected it to be, given what it was in the minor leagues. You have to wonder if maybe he wasn't tiring down a little bit. They did shut him down. I'm sure there was a reason for that. But I think that he showed plenty of stuff, and I think that it was really impressive that despite the fact that he didn't have his best stuff, he battled and battled and battled, and he just grinded his way through each one of his 4 starts, and he had an ERA under 3, despite the fact that he wasn't exactly dealing with, the best version of himself when he was in the big leagues. Robert Stevens and Sal Romano finished out the year strong. Both of those guys pitched very well over the last 6 to 8 weeks. Whether there's going to be that many rotation spots open up next spring, who knows? That's all going to depend on the health of, Homer Bailey, who, he finished out the season fairly well as well. But I think that there has to be question marks about Brandon Finnegan and Anthony DeSclafani as far as whether they're going to, 1, be healthy enough to pitch next year, and 2, if they're going to be ready to go at the start of the season. If not, that could leave open several spots in the rotation. If those 3 guys are healthy, toss in Luis Castillo, there might only be 1 spot available. And several young pitchers did perform quite well down the stretch. So, kind of figuring out what the Reds want to do as far as possibly acquiring another starting pitcher to kind of shore things up next year, or if maybe they just want to, go with the guys they've got, and depending on how the health plays out, maybe they'll just go with a few of the younger guys. We'll have to see. I wouldn't expect any immediate moves as soon as free agency starts in November. The Reds probably aren't going to be players for those kind of guys that are going to sign that early. Maybe if they hit the trade market, look for something in December when the winter meetings are going on. It's kind of where you see those kind of trades at least start to develop. Offensively, pretty much Jesse Winker was the only guy who got real playing time down the stretch as far as the young guys go. Phillip Ervin, when he did play, he performed well. But I think that looking forward to next year, he's probably going to be on the outside looking in for at least as far as a starting job goes, unless there's an injury of some kind. And probably only going to be in center field if there is an injury. I think that the corner outfield depth, there's enough guys there that if something were to come up, he'd still kind of be on the outside looking in as far as stepping into a starter's role. But I think that where Jesse Winker falls into things is going to be probably one of the bigger offseason question marks for the Reds. Right now it seems that Brian Price believes that Adam Duvall and Scott Schebler are his starting corner outfielders next year. He kind of backtracked from those statements a little bit, saying maybe he'll find a way to get all 3 guys into the corner outfield spots. I'm not so sure that he is capable of doing that, given how he decided to use Jesse Winker down the stretch when all 3 guys were healthy. It seems like Winker got a lot of his playing time when they were still kind of nursing the Billy Hamilton injury and sliding Scott Schebler into center field. But once he was back and both of the corner guys were there, most of the time went to Adam Duvall and Scott Schebler. Jesse Winker brings a very different aspect to the game than those two guys do. He's not the defender either one of those guys are. Doesn't quite have the power either one of those guys do. But, man, that guy, he hits and he gets on base. The lineup needs a lot more of that, and especially with Duvall, who, he's coming off back-to-back sub-300 on-base percentage seasons. It's tough for me to think that Jesse Winker wouldn't improve the offense, especially if you hit him in front of Joey Votto. Give Joey Votto another guy that's a high on-base percentage guy right in front of him. I think it would just create more opportunities, less chances for teams to necessarily pitch around Joey Votto. While I think they'd still be careful, first base won't be open as often as it would be otherwise. So I think that it's going to be key for the Reds to find a way to get Jesse Winker into the starting lineup almost every day next year. What they do with shortstop, because that Cozart's going to be a free agent. I don't know internally. I mean, realistically, if they're going to stick with somebody internally, it seems like it's either going to be Jose Peraza if they believe that he can play there, or Zach Vinci, who, they barely played him at all in September when he got called up. So I can't imagine them going that route. So it's probably going to be Peraza if they stick with somebody on the inside of the organization. Although I wouldn't be surprised if they looked outside of the organization as well, either in free agency or, maybe starting discussions and looking for somebody on the trade market. I don't think that's going to be their top priority on the trade market, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did, take a little look down that rabbit hole and see what's available. Let's see, what else do we got? Oh, okay. The Baseball America Midwest League Top 20 prospect list came out today. I was a little bit surprised when I started examining the list. I expected Taylor Trammell to be near the top of the list, and he was at number 6. Tyler Stevenson rebounded well off of last year where he's injured with the wrist pretty much off and on all year in 2016. Also made the list at number 17. What surprised me was that Jose Siri and Tony Santillan were not on the list. I struggle to find a way that those two guys aren't top 20 prospects in the league. I understand that it's a 16-team league, so it's tough to make the list. That works out to, 1.25 prospects per team for a top 20 list. So to have 4 guys on there, that may have been expecting a bit much, but man, Jose Siri's got the best tools of anybody in the Reds organization, and it's not like he didn't perform this year. He was a pretty much Gold Glove caliber center fielder who stole 46 bases, hit 290, hit 24 home runs. I don't know what else the guy has to do to make that kind of list. It's really surprising to me that he didn't make the list. And then, Tony Santillan, guy sits in the mid 90s. Heck, some games he was sitting in the upper 90s with his fastball. Had a good ERA, had a strikeout per inning. Inconsistent with the walks, but overall in the entire season didn't seem to have a big walk problem. It definitely could have been better, but it wasn't terrible. And the pure stuff is just, it rivals just about anybody in the league. So those two missing out really caught me off guard. Even with the depth of the league, I expected both of them to be there. Not that it means much, but it was a little bit surprising. And I want to keep this a little bit short, but as I was setting up the camera and microphone to record this, news hit Twitter and I guess everywhere else, but as with everything, news hits Twitter first because it's just easier to get the information out there. Atlanta Braves general manager, how do I pronounce that name? John, Cobolella? I don't know if I'm saying that right or not, but he resigned this afternoon. Apparently the Braves are being investigated for trying to circumvent the rules for signing international players. And one of his special assistant GMs also resigned along with this scandal. The Braves are not saying anything more than that. There hasn't really been any information that's come out since then. But the fact that it's all revolving around the international signing thing, this is the second time in the last 2 years, or is it 3 years, that a team has been busted I guess the Braves technically aren't busted yet for, working around the signing restrictions on the international front. The Red Sox got in trouble for it a couple years ago, and several of the players that they signed wound up becoming free agents. What they did, if you're unaware, is basically they weren't allowed to sign guys beyond a certain dollar amount. So what they did is they grouped up and signed a bunch of guys from one trainer in Latin America and spread out the signing bonuses to a bunch of those guys, and some of those guys filtered the money to someone else so that they would get a bigger bonus without it actually showing up on paper as a bigger bonus. As I said, there's no idea, or there's nothing out there right now as to what exactly the Braves were doing, but it is kind of a big deal that their general manager and an assistant general manager are both resigning over this. There's definitely got to be something to it. This isn't just rumor at this point. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Baseball's always kind of had a problem with how things work on the international market. The rules are just very different. And baseball has tried to change the way things are done down there. I say down there mostly because everything is coming from Latin America. I mean, there's still guys do sign out of Europe and Australia, but generally speaking, most of the signings are coming out of Latin America, and things are just way different down there. You've got your Buscones who basically pick up these kids between 12 and 14 years old and bring them in, and I mean, they basically just train these guys until it's their time to sign, and they can take, large chunks of their signing bonus as a repayment for, bringing them in and training them. Some of these guys come to deals with teams when they're 14, 15 years old, and technically that's not allowed, but everybody knows with a wink and a nod that, hey, it happens, and almost every team's in on it. Guys will agree to these deals when they're, 14, 15 years old, and then they won't work out for any other team for an entire year until they're eligible to sign. And that kind of thing happens every year. There's a lot of crazy things that go on down there, and Major League Baseball is definitely trying to, get better rules in place, make things a lot better, more like they are with the draft. Here in America, that includes guys from Canada and Puerto Rico, but they're not there yet, and teams are trying all that they can to get that competitive advantage in a market that is incredibly undervalued, and teams are getting caught, and I guess that's a good thing, but at the same time, it just kind of shows you that the teams understand as well that there's a lot to be gained if you can get the right kind of kids in this scenario, and to me that just kind of shows that they're incredibly undervalued and being kind of screwed by the system that is in place. But it is what it is. I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting thing that kind of showed up as I was getting things set up, and while it doesn't directly apply to the Reds, I think that it may lead to rules changes that will apply to the Reds in the future. But yeah, that's all for now. Hopefully we'll have something good to talk about in 2 weeks. Oh, real quick, playoffs start tomorrow. I'm gonna go with the Cleveland Indians going all the way. Arguably, they have the best pitching staff of all time in 2017, which is incredible to say because they don't have that Hall of Fame guy, anchoring their rotation. Nobody's going to confuse their rotation with, the mid-90s Braves, but statistically, compared to the league, they've performed significantly better than all of those teams did on the pitching side of things. So I just think you put that pitching staff together, and they've got several difference makers on the offense that, anything can happen in a 7-game series, but on paper, they're the best team. That's who I'm going to go with. But all right, well, thanks for tuning in, guys, and I will talk to you again in 2 weeks. See ya.